The Nutcracker Prince, WOLFWALKERS. Chapter 1. Clara couldn't remember the last time she saw her sister Louise look so nervous. "Sis, is something the matter?" Clara asked as she watched her older sister walk into her, Clara's, and their younger brother Fritz's den in a small cave chamber, where Clara herself was petting one of the 3 large gray wolves by her side. Clara and her siblings were not human. Though they looked the part half the time, they were wolf-walkers, beings who walked the earth as humans when they were awake, but when their human bodies lay asleep, their wolf forms would emerge and walk the earth. Some say their ancestors were cursed to be this way, for if any harm came to a wolf-walker in their wolf form, their sleeping human bodies would gain that said injury too. Some say it was a gift, for this allowed the wolf-walkers to do more than the typical human could. Clara and her pack certainly thought it was a gift. It's nothing, Clara. The pack meeting is about to begin. It's just I've never seen Pantaloon and Trudy look so worried." Louise trailed off in a concerned voice. Clara then walked up and hugged her sister reassuringly. "They're the alphas of our pack. I'm sure they're only worried about keeping us safe, since we wolf-walkers are so small in numbers," the girl said. Clara was a pretty young 12-year-old girl. Her shoulder-length auburn hair was pulled back and held up in a blue ribbon. She had crystal blue eyes, wore a teal-colored dress, and was pale-skinned and barefoot. Louise smiled at her younger sister and hugged her back. Louise was 18 and looked almost exactly like her younger sister, only older, and she wore a brown dress and was taller. "Let's go. The pack meeting is about to start," the older sister said as she guided Clara out of their den, as their 3 wolves followed close behind them. They stopped walking when they came to the main part of the cave, where 5 other wolf-walkers and at least 21 regular full gray wolves were waiting for them. Fritz, Clara and Louise's 8-year-old younger brother, was playing with some of the small wolf pups. He had light brown hair and eyes, wore a loose white shirt, brown breeches, and like the other wolf-walkers, he was barefoot. Next to Fritz was Clara's closest friends, Marie and her boyfriend Gaston. Marie was 13. She had curly brown hair, dark blue eyes, rosy cheeks. She wore a pink and blue dress and a blue bonnet on her head, and she had pale skin. Gaston, who was 14, had a short but curly black mustache and black hair. His eyes were the color of coal, and he wore a red loose shirt and black breeches. "All right, now that you're all here, we can begin the pack meeting," Pantaloon said as he and his mate Trudy stood in front of everyone in the cave. His mate Trudy wore an orange dress and a green shawl around her shoulders and a white bonnet over her shoulder-length gray hair, and she had coal-colored eyes. "Yes, as you are all aware, this pack has suffered greatly over the past few years, and as of now the 7 of us are the only wolf-walkers left in existence," Trudy said mournfully as Pantaloon continued on. "Which is why we have decided that this area is no longer safe enough for our pack, and we must find a much more suitable territory," he stated. "If I may be so bold as to ask, Alphas, where might we start looking for this new home?" Louise asked, speaking up. "South is where we will start, Louise." "It will be warmer and there will be more food available," Trudy stated. "We will be sending you and Clara to find this new territory," Pantaloon added, making Clara's eyes widen. "What? Alphas, why me and Louise?" she questioned. "Clara, you will be 13 soon. It's high time you took some responsibilities in this pack. The rest of us must stay here and prepare for the move," Trudy said. Clara could not only nod upon hearing this. She knew she spoke the truth. "What about me?" Fritz asked as he stood up next to his 2 sisters. "I'm sorry, lad, but I'm afraid you're too young for this pack mission," Pantaloon said, making Fritz frown. "But who's going to protect you 2? He asked, turning to Louise and Clara, who only smiled softly at their younger brother. "Fritz, you're needed here with the pack. You'll need to help everyone get ready for this move," Clara said as kindly as she could. "But what if something happens to you 2 and you never come back, like Mama and Papa?" the boy questioned while pouting. Louise stepped up and hugged both of her siblings close. "That won't happen, Fritz. We'll look out for each other and find a good new home for this pack," she promised, tightening the hug even more as the younger siblings hugged back. "You be safe, Clara, all right? You and Louise," Marie said as she hugged Clara goodbye the next day. We'll be back before you know it, Marie. I promise," Clara stated as she hugged her friend back.
"We will look after Fritz for you and your sister while you are both gone,"
Gaston said in his French accent. Clara smiled at her two best friends. "Thank you both so much. Take care of each other too, all right?" she said as she took both of her friends' hands in her own.
"We always have and we always will,"
Gaston said as he took Marie's free hand in his own tightly, while making her blush and smile. After saying goodbye to their pack, Clara and Louise and the dozen regular gray wolves began their long journey south on foot. "Clara, you look nervous. What's the matter?" Louise asked her sister as they both carried a satchel of supplies and walked alongside their wolf pack. Clara sighed. "Why did Pantaloon and Trudy choose me for this mission?" "You, I understand, Louise. I mean, you're a great leader and you're very clever. But me, I'm none of those things. Thus, I don't understand how I can help," the young girl trailed off. Louise smiled softly as she took her sister's hand in her own and squeezed it for reassurance as they continued to walk. "Clara, you're growing up, as Trudy said. Sometimes we have to do things that may seem like a lot at first, but in time we learn those things will help us grow stronger, whether we think we are ready or not," she said. Clara sighed. "I guess you're right, but I'm still scared all the same," she replied. "I'll tell you a secret, sis. I'm scared too, but I will never let that fear control me. We must do what is best for our pack, our family," Louise said gently. Clara smiled at her older sister. "Okay then, we'll do our best to find the pack a new home, right?" she said confidently, hugging her sister, who hugged back happily as their wolves huddled around them and licked their faces, making the two girls laugh. "We'll do this together, Clara. As sisters, I promise," Louise said as she and her sister and the wolves continued on their journey, making Clara smile. "I promise too." 14-year-old Hans was a strange boy to his village. He had long, dark black hair and a long ponytail. He had dark blue eyes and wore a white buttoned shirt with a brown vest over it and wore matching breeches. Hans was an amazing mechanic. He could fix nearly anything. However, because the boy spent so much time in his uncle's old workshop, Hans didn't have many friends. Many of the town thought him odd for not joining the army for the king like his older cousin Eric, who was 18 and a hunter to keep the wild animals far out of the walled kingdom. Hans and Eric lived in their Uncle Drosselmeyer's toy shop. While their uncle had passed away about a year ago from sickness, Hans did everything in his power to keep his memory alive by managing his toy shop. "There, all fixed," Hans said triumphantly as he held up a small cuckoo clock while his gray kitten Pavlova purred at his feet. "Mrs. Miller will be pleased that I finished fixing her grandfather's clock earlier than expected. Come on, Pavlova, let's go drop it off," the boy said as he got up from his desk, which was quite messy, that also belonged to his and his cousin's uncle. Hans and Eric each lost their parents from sickness when they were young boys, and since then they had been living with their Uncle Drosselmeyer in the toy shop in the small flat above it, where the three of them had previously lived until their uncle had died. Since then, it had just been Eric, Hans, and their kitten Pavlova, whom Hans found abandoned in the streets about 2 months ago. "Come on, Pavlova, the miller's home is just around the corner," Hans called, picking up an apple on his way out of the toy shop, and only to almost run into his cousin Eric, who was just coming in. "Hans, be careful. How many times must I tell you?" Eric scolded as he narrowly avoided slamming into his younger cousin. Eric was tall, wore a red hunting uniform, and he carried a crossbow and arrows on his back. He had brown eyes, a short brown hair, and a small ponytail. "Sorry, Eric, I just have to deliver this to Mr. and Mrs. Miller and—" Hans started, but his cousin cut him off. "Don't tell me their old clock broke yet again," he said rather than asked. "Eric, little things like this clock mean a lot to some people. When all we have left as someone is our memories, we must make sure those memories never die. That's why Mrs. Miller loves this old clock. She was very close with her grandfather, and we were very close with Uncle Drosselmeyer," Hans stated firmly. Eric sighed. "You know there's a difference from remembering someone who's passed on and just not letting go of grief, Hans." The young boy's grip tightened on the clock. "I'll be back shortly," he trailed off as he left the toy shop with Pavlova following close behind him. "Honestly, that boy spends too much time alone," Eric thought to himself. "Oh, thank you so much, Hans. I appreciate all you've been doing to keep my old clock up and running," Mrs. Miller stood happily as Hans set the clock on the mantel while standing on a short ladder. "It's no trouble at all, Mrs. Miller," Hans replied with a smile as he got down from the ladder. "Oh, that reminds me, I have something quite odd that happened to my husband last week, and I think you'd find it quite interesting," Mrs. Miller said in a hushed whisper. "Really? What happened? Is he all right?" Hans asked as he picked up Pavlova, who purred in his arms. "Please, sit down. We'll have tea and I'll tell you everything, if you promise to keep it all a secret," Mrs. Miller said, looking around as if to check if anyone else was listening. "I promise," Hans stated sincerely, making the woman before him smile. "Wolf-walkers?" Hans questioned, raising an eyebrow as he sat with Mrs. Miller at the tea table in the parlor while Pavlova was asleep by his lap. "Yes, they are half human and half wolf. They say that these beings walk as humans by day and as wolves at night. They have the power to heal others as well. My husband saw 2 of them when he was with his fellow woodcutters, making way for the newest part of the kingdom's village," Mrs. Miller said in a low voice. "What?" Hans trailed off softly. "Yes, these wolf-walkers were among the wild wolves, and they obeyed their every command. They gave the woodcutters quite a scare. My husband and the rest of them ran when they saw them, but my dear beloved tripped and injured his ankle. He couldn't walk and thought he would be devoured, but the wolves simply sniffed him and whimpered at their 2 wolf-walker masters. They were 2 young women. One looked about your cousin's age, and the younger looked about a year or 2 older than you, my boy. But anyway, my husband said he had never been more scared in his entire life. These female wolf-walkers kneeled down and howled like wolves around him. A golden light poured from their hands onto his injured ankle. Just like that he could walk again, as if the accident never happened," Mrs. Miller stated, finishing the story. "Wow. Then what happened?" Hans questioned in wonder as Pavlova played with a tassel on a pillow next to Hans. "The wolf-walkers told my husband to leave and stop cutting down their forest, and then the 2 in their pack retreated into the woods. He's been trying to stop the village expansion ever since. That's why he's gone off to the castle today. He's trying to convince the king to do as the wolf-walkers said, though I doubt his majesty will listen. I doubt he would even believe my husband." Mrs. Miller trailed off with worry in her voice as she stared down at her half-full cup of tea in her hands. "Well, you believe him. I'd say that's enough," Hans said kindly. Mrs. Miller looked up at the boy and smiled. "Thank you, Hans. You have a kind heart. It's a wonder you have no special girl in your life." Hans blushed. "Well, actually, Princess Perlipants seems to be quite interested in me, from what Eric says at least." "Why, the princess must want to marry you. What do you think of her?" Mrs. Miller questioned. Hans sighed. "I'm not really interested in her. I mean, the princess is beautiful, no doubt, but she's very self-centered and a bit cruel. I want a girl who would love me for who I am, not just appearance," the boy stated. "Well, with the heart of gold that you have, I don't think that should be a problem. Now off you go. I'm sure you have to close up your uncle's shop for the day, and your cousin might be wondering where you are. It's nearly supper time," Mrs. Miller stated, cleaning up the table. "Oh, you're right. The sun is beginning to set. Let's go, Pavlova," Hans said as he picked up his kitten and began to head towards the front door. "I enjoyed your story, Mrs. Miller. I hope everything works out in the end for what your husband is requesting from the king," Hans said politely as Mrs. Miller waved him goodbye once he stepped outside. "Wolf-walkers, I don't believe it. What about you, Pavlova?" the dark-haired boy asked as he held Pavlova close as she simply stared at him while licking her paw. "I know it's very hard to believe. Perhaps the Millers made up the story. The king is becoming rather controlling. Maybe they're just trying to make me see that more," Hans said as he walked into his shop, ignoring the villagers' whispers about how odd he was when he passed through the town. Upon entering the shop, Hans noticed something on the front desk out of the corner of his eye. It was Eric's crossbow and quiver of arrows. "Eric, you've got to be joking!" the boy exclaimed as he put Pavlova down and picked up the weapon and its ammo pack. "We have to bring these to Eric, Pavlova. Let's go," Hans said, rushing out of the door while Pavlova followed close behind.